Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we're back. Sorry for the, I guess, growing time frame between videos. Rest assured, I am sitting here every day, but I've been trying to do a bunch of different things all at once, and yeah, I finally got some stuff working. So I thought maybe I'll show you guys. So let's show you the two things that I've been kind of building. We'll start with the worst thing, so we'll jump over to my screen here. We're not going to start in Unity. We're going to start with the ugliest thing that I've been kind of building. By the way, partial warning, this is simulated nudity, I suppose. I'm building a base female model, so this will be a female body. If you're at a workplace or somewhere where people may not appreciate that, it's not overly realistic. It's all gray and in Blender, and it looks pretty bad, but here it comes. You've been warned. So, ta-da! I've been working on my base female model. Now, as you can tell, a lot of things are still very ugly about this, and I really need to put more time into it. But this is just a very much work-in-progress model. And there's a lot of things that I've been learning about modeling that has really improved. So, based off of the previous models that I made, and I'm actually going to straight up show you guys Norbert, if I can. Which ones? Yeah, Norbert New Anims should be a good one. So here's kind of like one of the first models that I ever built, and you can see this topology is wretched. And obviously this won't make it into the final game. This was like the first attempt I ever had at modeling. And he looks kind of interesting. He's a wacky character, but I really didn't know how to make like folds and things like that. And then at one point in time, I was like, oh man, his try count's getting really high. How can I lower that? And I went online and looked around, and everyone was like, oh, there's this cool decimate tool. And I was like, sweet, I'll click that. And I lowered the try count. The model looked the same. And I thought, oh, that's great. What I didn't realize is it basically just litters his model with triangles, which makes for some really funky animation stuff. A lot of these points are really offset and things like that, because I was trying to make all these fat folds and really didn't know any better way to do that. I didn't know I could do that with two close points instead. So he's a very messy character. I mean, obviously, if we hide the armature, you can probably see it a little better. But yeah, so he's kind of a bit of a messy model. So what I've been trying to do is clean up my modeling skills, and I figured a higher detailed human model might be a good way to practice at. So by no means is this done. This is just kind of general shaping, and then I'm going to go through and actually add details that will make the body look a little more realistic and less kind of frumpy like it's going now. But if you look at this model's, I go to vertex mode, you look at this model's mesh compared to this model's mesh, you can just see, I guess, how much cleaner I've gotten at this modeling thing. This one's it's not completely terrible, but certainly decimate is a bad button. I'm not going to push that again unless I'm ready for a decimated model. I should have kind of known from the name. And then the face is not great yet, but as you can tell, probably it's all right. It's okay. I've managed to figure out how to make like proper seams. The topology is hopefully pretty clean along the face and stuff like that. So yeah, it's something I'm working on. You can tell I haven't even finished an ear yet. It's just kind of base modeling this. And then I'm kind of, everything I'm making, I'm keeping a subsurf on, and you can take the subsurf off, so we can have kind of a more low poly version of this if we want to. Oops, that's the mirror modifier. We want that. So yeah, that's a general look of the subsurf. So things like modeling breasts is actually really complicated if you've never modeled before, because they're kind of like circles, right? And circles are hard things to make when you're making it out of rectangles. Rectangles don't look very circular. So actually, the whole thing, you can kind of do these little rectangle pieces for like nipple covers and stuff, and that's kind of, it's really hard basically, because you can get up to this point and then you have this hole and you're like, what should I do? I think a lot of people, what they do is they just create one big old face here, and it's not 4 points. So I'm trying my best to keep every single thing on this model to not use any triangles, except for a few places where triangles are actually kind of better. Like there's some ankle topology where this deforms better if you add one triangle in at the ankles and things like that. I don't exactly know why, but yeah, so that's just general things. A lot of stuff like that. The sizing is really rough because I pulled the hands in from the other model and stuff like that. But yeah, this is my human female model. I hope at least by looking at this you might go like, oh yeah, you know, like, Matt's getting a little better at this, I suppose. Like, you know, it's a face. It looks like a face. It's certainly a lot higher resolution stuff than Norbert, who I love Norbert quite a bit, but he does not have what I would call an overly wonderfully built model. Especially the UVs are really bad, and that's caused a lot of issues with his stuff. So anyways, I've learned a lot. It's been, what, a month and a half, 2 months since I started using Blender, so I think I'm getting somewhere. And yeah, I figured it couldn't hurt to have a base human female, so that's what I've been working on. However, then I took a break from that because I realized that we have run into a bit of an issue. Yeah, please don't save. With the game, and the procedural generation system that I was using I think is going to be too problematic to use in the long run. So what I did is I bought a plugin called Dungeon Architect, and it's really cool. The way it procedurally generates levels is super straightforward and easy. It's really awesome, but I don't feel like it's really built for a full game. To give you a basic rundown, the problem is attaching a specialized room to that is quite a task. What it does is it builds all these chunks, and then it attaches the chunks, and it runs all these algorithms to kind of like place hallways that need to connect to rooms, and then if there's a big enough collection of chunks they turn into a room. And it's this really crazy algorithm that, I'll be honest, is beyond my level of programming skill. However, at the same time, there's no kind of control over that. You just get a big old random dungeon. So if you wanted to say go do a game jam, I think it's the greatest dungeon generator ever. You just quickly build it, throw it together, click build, and done. You have a whole dungeon. It's up and running, and it looks pretty cool. The problem is that trying to add sort of custom controls. So let's say, for example, that you wanted a dungeon that has a boss room as the final room built. Well, that's not so easy to do with a system that kind of generates all these chunks and then kind of attaches them later. I was trying to get in touch with the developer of it to see if he had any sort of solutions in plan, and it looked like what he's doing is he's building a new version that kind of works like this dungeon procedural dungeon generator I'm going to show you guys now, but he's still kind of in mid-process of building that. And I think he plans to eventually attach it. But I wanted to have more custom control over this, so I built it myself. So yeah, this is my dungeon generator. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just show you, click the button, and it builds a dungeon. So I'm going to give you a very quick rundown of how this all works, because it's quite complicated and it's like hundreds and hundreds of lines of code. But I'll explain the premise behind this. And yeah, if you want to build your own dungeon generators, this thought process probably will help. So what it does is it builds an array, and it actually builds the dungeon in memory before it builds the actual pieces on here. So we build the dungeon in memory, and then once we have that set up, we kind of cycle through that entire list and we add a prefab to it. So what we have down here, it's really kind of messy right now. We're going to build a probably better system to contain this, but is just a list of different arrays. So we can increase the size of these as we go. But we have one for every potential direction. So all would be 4 corners or 4 connectors, which we have none of in this dungeon. Down would be a dungeon that only has a connection down. So I don't think we really have too many of those either. Up is a good example, or sorry, this one right here. This piece only connects to one other piece, and that's down from that. So this piece would be a down piece. So what you'll see is that this individual, oops, not that cube. This individual piece right here has nothing but a down connection point on it. So this is just a visual layout so that we can see that the procedural generator is working correctly, and that it's pulling from this list of prefabs. So to make it, hopefully this isn't too complicated to follow along, but pretty much there's 15 possible connection points for a 4 connecting dungeon. You could do the potential like a 9 square grid where you can connect diagonally. I've decided to go against that because of the style of game. I actually think it's better if we keep it kind of a 3D version of a 2D game. So I'm not going to put in support for that. I am thinking about doing height support so that we can have like kind of like mountains that are going to like, rise, and you're going to go up and down and things like that. And it's not too much more difficult to build, but it does increase the complexity quite a bit. So for now, I'm just happy to have this working. So yeah, so it takes a prefab for every one of those. So basically this piece, it goes, oh, okay, this has 2 neighbors. It has a neighbor to the right and a neighbor below. Therefore, it needs to be a right and a down connecting piece. And then these right, down, left, up are actually kind of a little bit ambiguous. Technically in the script, it's all using something called xneg, xpause, zneg, zpause, or zneg, zpause for American listeners. And yeah, so it's doing those 4 connecting points. It never needs to handle Y connection points because it might have a preset. These might have different various heights, but all we would do is we would build more possible room containers that are going to handle that. So we'll just kind of increase that prefab complexity if we need to. And then all we have to do is when we design these rooms, we just make sure that they connect together on a seam. So you can use in the dungeon generator here, you can set a room preset size. So if we destroy the dungeon, we go, you know what, let's have all the rooms really far apart. We can go like that, we can build them. And you can see it's still connecting them properly. So later on, what we'll do is we'll kind of build a little room, and let's say we build a little bridge and we stop it right at this point here, and we build a little bridge on this side, we stop it right at this point here, and they seam together. Great. Then now it'll look like one cohesive piece of land. And because of that, you can do whatever you want in this room. You can make it a circle, you can make it a square, you can rotate it, you can do anything you want. And it's really customizable for building sweet, cool rooms in a dungeon crawler. So this is going to set me back a little bit. Progress is going to go backwards, but then hopefully it's going to go forwards, and it's going to be a lot better. I think this is going to build a more interesting thing. So let's go back down to 11, because I think it's a little bit easier to visualize that. Destroy, rebuild the dungeon. So the other thing that I was working on tonight is I wanted to get some more randomization, but a little bit more control. So you see this dungeon's very spread out. So naturally the way this dungeon generator works is actually if we increase this clump value all the way up to 1 and build the dungeon, it actually clumps together pretty solidly. So what I've done is I've given just a bit of a slider here so that I have more control over the clumpiness of the dungeon. So if you see, oops, missed the button. If we had clumpiness is about half, then it takes that clumpiness of that original dungeon, but it builds out a few branching paths as well, which I think gives a little more interesting dungeon layouts. And then obviously as we reduce this clumpy size, it gets less and less clumping. And yeah, all the way down to 0 clumping, which is basically every single room is only going to be connected to one other room if possible. So yeah, you see there's a few 2s, but for the most part it's going to try and do just one connectors as often as humanly possible. And yeah, that's working really well. Actually, I'm quite happy with all this. And the other thing that's cool for people who've never worked with procedural generation is getting a seed in. So what a seed does is basically you feed in a number value, and this is the random number of the dungeon. So every time we click build, destroy, it's going to build the same dungeon. Changing the clumping value obviously makes modifications to this, but even clumping value, if we set clumping value to 0.385, destroy the dungeon, build, destroy, build, we're getting the same dungeon every time. So this is generating a procedural dungeon, but it's based off of a seed value. So what you do with a seed value is basically you take this random number and you run it through an algorithm. That algorithm pumps out the next random number that you want. It's called a pseudo random number generator because it's not actually random. As long as you have the seed value, you can basically decrypt it. And this is literally how encryption works in I guess cybersecurity. If you need to encrypt something, or you're logging into your banking information, or even when you're logging into any website, you should have some sort of encryption. And what they do is they basically I mean, it's very complicated. I can't really tell you everything about encryption, but yeah, they take these seed numbers and then based on that you can kind of decode something. So using this seed, we can decode the dungeon and rebuild it over and over. So if we randomize the seed, so let's say we'll build the dungeon one more time so you can see it. So you got these 2 little horn-looking pieces on it. It's kind of a cool dungeon. Destroy. We randomize the seed. Oh, I'm clicking on it so you can't see it update. Let's click off. There, now we have a new seed here. We click build, and look, we get a whole new dungeon layout. And again, build, destroy, build, destroy. As long as we have that same seed feeding in, we get the same random values. So seeds are pretty cool because every time you randomly generate a number, it's going to get a random number, but it's going to get a random number based off of the previous random numbers. So as you go through your script and you write more and more random calls, those random calls are all still going to pass the same value of random number to the next random call, which lets you kind of back trace it and build the same dungeons. As long as they have the same seed input, all those random values are going to randomize in the exact same way. So basically when you build a video game, all you need to do is you need to take this seed value and then just click this random button right before you start the game, build dungeon, and boom, you get a new random dungeon layout every time you play. So the boss room can be down here. This darker tile is demonstrating the boss room, by the way. It can be down there, we randomize the seed, build, and now it's up here. So the player's never really going to know exactly where to go. And this kind of builds dungeons similar to, I guess, every dungeon crawler probably you've ever played. Binding of Isaac, Enter the Gungeon, Rogue Legacy, things like that are all kind of built with this sort of style in mind. And then yeah, all these rooms are just kind of told how to seam together. So what I'm going to end up doing now is I'm going to spend a lot of time building a bunch of cool different rooms that count as each of these connecting pieces. It'll probably take me quite a while to get all of them put together, but because I've built the rooms a few times now, I don't think it's going to be that bad. Just, you know, it's time consuming, but that's what building games are. So you can see it's a little bit messy. I've got like test button woo and reset everything and all that kind of stuff going on, but we're not getting any errors popping up, which is great because yeah, I've had quite a few errors popping up with this so far. So that's the current process of everything. got the procedural dungeon generator working. It's going to be improved over time. There's certainly a lot of things I want to add to it, but technically in the state it's in right now, I can build a fully functioning game. And I can even give players an option. When you play the game, you could decide, I want dungeons to be really clumpy. Oh, I don't want dungeons to be so clumpy. And we just change that clump value, and then ta-da, you get your own options in terms of how you want to play the game. So it's really cool to be able to build little variables in like that that directly affect the generation of the dungeon. And that's something I wasn't getting from that tool that I downloaded. And I downloaded it specifically so I wouldn't have to spend the time to go and build and do all this stuff. But frankly, having to go and build on somebody else's plugin often leads you with that problem anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of just building it myself happening because it's a lot easier to work with when you've created it yourself. And one, you're comfortable with the code, you know how to go through it and change things very easily. But two, I can add all these custom parameters that I think are important to a dungeon generating system. So yeah, if anybody's looking at getting their own procedural dungeon generator up, maybe someday I'll throw this on the store and I'll build it out a little bit more and make it a little easier to work with for people who aren't me, and throw it out there. In the meantime, I think honestly your best solution is probably to make it yourself. There's another one called DunGen I looked into that looks like it might kind of handle it similar to the one I've built here. But I don't know. I haven't tried it. They're all like $75, and I already burned $50 on something that's not really useful at all to me. So yeah, I'm just going to keep building it myself so that I can now customly control these things. So kind of one step back, but two steps forward. I hope we're going to get some really cool dungeony stuff built out of this. And yeah, so basically I just really need to keep spending a lot of hours and time in Blender, which is where I've been spending a decent amount of time, to just get better at modeling. I need to learn more about creating better seams and creating better models and just art in general. Like you can tell by that kind of monkey looking face, like the lips are still too wide and there's like some stuff, and the profile starts looking good, and you can tell if I've worked from the side view a lot, because you look at the profile from the side and you'll go, oh, it looks really good, and you flip to the front and you're like, Matt needs to put more time into the front of the model. So yeah, this is coming along real well. I'm really happy with everything, and more than anything, my own personal skill set has come up, and now life's hit a point where I get the next 2 months where I'm allowed to work on this full time, and then it's over and I need to work on this in my spare time. So I'm going to try to get as much or as many cool tools built as I can, so that if I only put in 2 or 3 hours, I get 2 or 3 hours of really solid work out of it, as opposed to this stuff where like I don't really want to build a procedural generator 2 hours at a time. It's something I really just want to sit down and tear all the way through. So that is the status of the game. It kind of, I guess, is looking more like I've gone backwards, but hopefully you can see that a lot of these skill sets and things are getting kind of evolving, and the game will be better off for it in the long run. So thank you guys for watching and following along. I hope this is really interesting for you, or as interesting for you as it is for me. I'm loving developing my skill set on this stuff, and I'm hoping that as I show you what I've learned and what I've created, I can also just kind of give you a bit of advice or teaching if you want to go out and learn this stuff on your own. So yeah, and even for the procedural generator, I watched a video on procedural generation, and then I used that as a baseline for how to write the script, and then I went, I don't really like this way of writing it, and I threw probably 80% of it out, and I just kind of kept a couple of the base function names and rewrote everything myself so that I can make it my own way. But it was cool to see somebody else's thought process and how they built it first. That kind of stuff really kind of helps me work through all this. And for anybody who is comfortable and a programmer themselves and has ever tried to work with Unity, modifying the inspector, or even more modifying windows, like custom editor windows, and maybe making node-based custom editor windows, oh my God, is the documentation ever terrible for that. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to take me forever to tear through, but yeah, day by day I'm getting a little better at this. And yeah, I'm starting to feel like I'm almost ready to start kind of, I guess, letting the game just build itself out. I have a big list of tools I want, and I'm working through them, and I'm creating them, and they're really coming along. So yeah, sorry, it's still probably the first year of this game's generation is going to be really boring. Like Super Robot Jump Jump, when I built that, was like I had one test level for I think 4 months, and that was it. And then I worked in that test level and I built all the things I needed, and then all of a sudden, like very quickly, like 2 months after 4 months of nothing, 2 months later, it was like, ooh, I have 50 levels or something, and I started generating all this content very fast because I had the really good tools to help me build it. So yeah, now that we have this, if I sat down and spent a week on prefabs, it would look like we have a fully fleshed out world that generates a lot smoother and better than the other one. And now that we can attach our own custom prefab boss rooms, we can do some really awesome stuff with that. And I think that that's just extra cool. So yeah, now I can build the game in 2 days that before was going to take me 2 weeks. So yes, these things look like I'm not making any progress, but trust me, they really do pay off in the long run. So I will catch you guys next time. I will try to keep videos coming as long as I've got something to show. So I hope these two pieces are interesting. And hopefully with this procedural generator going into the game, I'm able to step back again and spend a few weeks on art. Art is unfortunately not going to have anything cool coming out because I don't think the art that I'm creating is up to the quality that I'm expecting for this game. But that just means I need to make more art until I get there. So I'm going to keep on arting until I can not suck so much at drawing and modeling. So I will see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day, evening, or whatever it is for you.